to the meeting. Is everything, can anybody see everything? Am I sharing my screen?
Yeah, we're all good.
Perfect. Hello. Welcome to the PropTech Innovation Fund Show and Tell for September 2023. As I said today, we're going to give a short update from the activities that Digital Citizen Engagement team have been up to over the last couple of weeks. We've also got some exciting presentations from Joe from Cotswolds and West Oxfordshire. We've got Hounslow, Chesterfield and Urban Intelligence talking about their reps management tool, I think. And then we'll also have a presentation from Southampton regarding their work with Stat Consultees and what they're doing within the PropTech Fund. And then there'll be some space to have any questions after any of those presentations, and also space at the end to talk to ask any questions of any of the presenters or from us at the PropTech team. So it's a bit of an AI heavy update here today, but we had a great AI discussion group last week with presentations from Commonplace, Digital Urban and Faculty AI, talking about the work in and out of the PropTech Fund, interesting applications of AI, and a really great session from Faculty talking about the ethical use of AI with it at the moment, and they've released some guidance which we'll link to in the slides, which will be shared on after this. So if you're interested in what they've been up to, please do click on that link, and at some point I'll be able to pop that in the chat while everyone's talking. Joe and I are also attending the Levelling Up AI working group. So that's an internal group where we're looking at the applications of AI across us as a government department, and we'll be sharing the guidance, emerging standards and any of those themes through the AI applications and planning working group, and also updating through this group. So if anyone's interested in that, because we know it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, we just like to make sure that we are bringing you into some of those discussions. And if you do want to know any more about either the PropTech Innovation Fund conversations or the Levelling Up conversations, then do reach out and we'd be happy to share any of those emerging themes or the discussion points. And also we've got some upcoming events that we want to talk to you about. So 27th of September, there's a Land Tech event. Also on the 13th of October, there's an Engage Symposium, and then the AI Fringe on in the end of October. Encourage anyone, if they're available, to go to any of these things, and I think that we'll have some representation at some of them, but we'll be able to give any detailed update on any of those things as they emerge. One of the biggest things that we've done in the last week was the round 4 discovery workshops. I think most of you that are in this room today were invited or were able to attend those workshops, but basically we engaged with local authorities and suppliers across and industry partners to look at how we can develop a strategy for our future funding round for round 4, which is hopefully coming up very soon, and we'll keep this group updated as to any of those dates and how to apply. It was a really interesting discussion, and I'm going to hand over to Joe to talk about his feelings about what emerged from the conversations.
Amazing, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, and I keep this short and sweet because I think most people were in the room, and for those who weren't in the room, what we were exploring is how digital tools can help with land assessment. And I think it was quite interesting across both local authorities and suppliers that there is a broad recognition and ambition to improve this. So there's a real, probably a collective drive and ambition is probably the right word, how we can automate the current processes and approaches undertaking land assessment. I think the interesting thing was that when we spoke about land assessment, there was different interpretations of what that actually meant across different local authorities, and there was different processes across the piece. So that's when we want to challenge it, I think, with this funding round, and we're quite excited to kick that off. But again, as I said, that collective recognition, and as Jessica said, I think the numbers alone, I think 180 people to attend the discovery workshop was, we were taken aback by the number, and that was people inside and outside of the fund. So that was the first kind of big takeaway message. The second and that third bullet point is recognizing that the public sector adoption has not kept pace with industry adoption. And that was people talking about kind of actually what they wanted to do. So there was a real emphasis in the local authority one when we kind of looked at what people were looking to achieve. So people were talking about local plans, land assessment, and interoperability challenges with data. If we then had the second one, we worked with the suppliers, we were looking at kind of some broader opportunities. People were talking about focusing more on environmental, ESG, retrofitting, EPC rating. So you can just kind of see the disparity to an extent. But again, we've got some really good ideas to take away. And the goal of them, both of them sessions, for people who weren't aware, was like round two, I think most of you were part of, we were trying to get the themes that we were going to enable people to apply with. So land assessment's a broad term, again, different meaning. So we're really trying to hone in on that. But the big takeaway and the really positive was what we can see is the lessons learned from this fund, from the various 4 rounds of funding, is that there's very similar interlinks between where we were in round one with DCE and where we are with land assessment. So I think there's a really good opportunity in the piece. But again, I think the big takeaway from us and what we shared with DLUG is that collective drive and ambition. And if people do have any questions, please do put them in the chat. But I think the big takeaway message, which I'm sure everyone is interested in, is we're looking to launch that at the end of October, roughly. So stay tuned. There will be comms coming out and we'll send them emails to you and look at our various LinkedIn, Twitter pages. But yeah, stay tuned. But they're the big reflections. But any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll try and answer them at the end of the session.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it was great. It was great to have so many people in the room, which I know Joe's touched upon, and the amount of intelligence and information that we got from those Miro mural boards that we used. It was incredible, and it's not going to go to waste. We're already looking at like how it feeds into other longer term strategies and how we make space to bring local authorities and suppliers together to make sure that we're making people aware of the great work that's going on in both avenues. So there'll be lots more things coming on as always. And finally from us, just wanted to let you know that the UK PropTech Awards nominations are now open. So nominate yourselves, each other, do things. So we'd just let you know that I think it closes on the 3rd of October. So we'd just like to give you spaces to celebrate yourselves and each other. And so if you think it's applicable, then use that as a channel to raise your profile. That is enough from us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. As I said, if you have any questions about any of the DCE updates or the future funding rounds, there will be some time at the end probably, and pop things in the chat and we'll be able to answer them too. But now I'm going to hand over to Jo at Cotswolds and West Oxfordshire for her presentation.
Hello, everyone. So this one is actually very much more focused on West Oxfordshire because we've been, well, the latest Reg 18 is currently out for consultation with them. And this is a piece of work that we did around persona mapping and market research to try and reach new audiences in new ways that we've never done before, because part of our key relationship and success to our consultations since we've been working in this space is our relationship with our comms team. So this was really heavily driven by our head of comms and marketing alongside myself. And I'm just going to talk you through it. But hopefully it will be interesting. Get to the right page. All working?
Just loading, Joe.
I can see it fine.
All good. Okay. So why did we do this piece of work? The page isn't moving. Hang on. There it is. The overall reason for doing this piece of work is that we want to continue to reach more audiences, find ways to tailor messaging to attract those not traditionally engaged. We appointed a local market research company, mainly to do 2 things for us. One, reviewing our stakeholder list and getting us some more contacts, and the second to then do some persona mapping and empathy mapping for us. Like many others, we know that often all of the under 55 age groups are very underrepresented, as you can see it on the right-hand bar graph. And that also, although we're still attracting about 50% new audiences, we wanted to kind of do better than that. So still not working. My keys. There we go. So there was the two parts to this. The first thing we asked them to do was to gather us 100+ new contacts, including email addresses, social media channels, Instagram handles, etc., where such traditional methods such as their email address wasn't available. In order to avoid duplication, we identified 7 new personas, if you like, that aren't traditionally engaged. Interestingly enough, they also identified for us that a lot of the AB who are already engaged with the local plan actually live in the sort of older housing stock rather than the newer housing estates, etc. So they really focused in on those younger, newer communities. So as well as doing the contact information, they did a series of in-depth discovery interviews with at least one individual from those key groups. And it kind of produced these little personas with lots of very useful information in them. I've drawn out particularly kind of how do these personas gather and sort of absorb information, because this is where we're focusing at the moment. But what's very useful is, you know, tells us what do they think about the local plan, how do they feel, etc., etc. So this was Alison Artist, and then we've also got Harry Head Gardener. I won't go through all 7, but it gives you an idea. But particularly, we were finding most were talking about local WhatsApp groups, and that's not something that we've seen really be shared or people be sharing across their own social channels. We've also used that data to then form our social media messaging, branding, and also making sure we segment the messaging to different age demographics. So whereas you tend to get a slightly older within Facebook, so the messaging is different for the same Facebook/LinkedIn versus Instagram. There's a little example up here for you. Again, I don't want to bang on too much, you get the idea. There were some interesting little kind of cap shots that came out about what people were saying about different social media. Again, particularly many people commented that they're on part of local WhatsApp groups. And the next door comments was quite interesting, because we were often very much encouraged by our local councillors to use Nextdoor more. But very much Instagram was the highest kind of active channel amongst that under 55 age groups and those that they identified. But with Facebook still very much being used as an information gatherer. So what's next? So we decided that really the overall aim, an amazing goal would be if we can get, you know, even 10 of these key personas sharing council engagement activities, in particular the local plan, but also anything else we're doing. There's some community funding coming out, as well as the Climate Action Network. And what we think would be a way to really crack and get into those other communities is for those peers, if you like, to be actually sharing those comms for us across the networks, because we can do as much advertising as we like, this, that, and the other. But until it starts coming from those people themselves, you know, they are the ones with the influence far more than the council. We're going to try, hopefully we'll get people to accept the invite, to do an invite-only event to all those people to explain to them what we'd like them to do. That's being headed up by the leader of the council. And we'll just watch the space and keep looking at that information, see how we get on, monitor our feedback, and take it from there. That is very short and sweet, but that's me, I hope.
Thanks, Jo.
Any questions?
I like. There's a lot of positivity for your illustrations there, and I think you said before that they were AI generated, so that's like in theme from our introduction.
I might have knocked this up in an hour and a half, so just before the meeting. So thank Canva AI illustration. And I just pinched those little like persona descriptions and just said, please create me an illustration portrait using the following information. And that's what it did. So there's still AI, I'm afraid. But yeah. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of work or anything? I'm going to share the full report with Cheska anyway, so you guys can all get a copy of it. And the marketing company were fine with that.
No, great. I mean, as I said, open the floor to any questions from anyone. I know, like, I think it's really great that you've taken the time. I know that often local authorities don't have the time to go this in depth with them, some of those things. So it is great to see when you can allocate the time to develop multiple personas. I suppose my question, Joe, would be like, if because you've done all that hard work, what would be like your top key takeaway if we didn't have the capacity to go into that much detail? What would you say that the local authorities could take on board if they wanted to do a similar exercise, but maybe a bit, smaller?
I have no idea, because we were in a really fortunate position to have a big wedge of dosh to be able to spend. Thanks to you guys. I suppose really the key relationship is with our comms team, and that we always develop that strong branding. We have worked with them in the past anyway and done a far more scattergun approach around the targeted ads, and we've seen good results. But it's like I said, it's not been that targeted, like intelligent messaging to really look at those under 55s. And I think we've always all hoped to try and go for the under 25s, but all our data shows that it's under 55s as well. And there's a massive chunk there, who are actually, a lot of them are mums and dads with those 25 and unders. So we're going to try. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's a few interesting celebs, as it were, that are in West Oxfordshire, one of whom we're not allowed to contact, mainly because we shut down his restaurant. But also we've got the likes of Alex James, who's in Blur and that kind of stuff, and they've all been added. So, and the comms team, fair play to them, are going to have a go. So you never know.
I like it. Leverage the local community. Helen, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Joe. It's so interesting, and yeah, I totally agree that joining up with your comms team is critical. If you don't have a wedge of cash, it's also worth asking your comms team if they have mosaic data which contains some of those standard personas. Depends how up to date they are, obviously, but it's a good starting place if you've got nothing.
Yeah, or even I think if you actually look at, because what we did, we started doing a stakeholder mapping exercise with our existing list of contacts and realised they were all of a certain age group, certain place, and a lot with private development industry, who always respond, but we weren't really getting that newer audience, which ultimately was why we started this whole journey, if you like. So we just had a little bit of a refocus on that. But thanks, Helen, that was really helpful.
Thanks both. Chris, would you like to come in?
Yeah, probably should, given that we did something remarkably similar about 2 years ago. I think it's brilliant, Jonah, and some of the conclusions you've reached have been very similar to the ones we reached. I get just a couple of observations and maybe a couple of things that maybe you'll be able to update me on. Is have you found out where the 18 to 25-year-olds are hanging out on social media? Have they come out from somewhere? I mean, they weren't on Instagram and they weren't on Facebook when we were doing it 2 years ago. And the other point I was just going to ask is, in terms of promoting things on Facebook, the cost of that and the value of that, have you done any much work on how sort of economical that piece is? And the last point, I guess, is on the com side of things. Is I mean, I've probably heard me say this before, spent a lot of time with our comms officers de-planifying everything that we've ever done in where we are, to ensure that the messages that you put out on Facebook and Instagram are not full of acronyms and planning terms. Is that where you see, I'm not telling you that this is the answer, but in terms of the comms value of that piece, Was that something that they brought to the party? That was certainly a lesson we learned, is that they told us an MRT makes so much sense to the average planner, but the average 18-year-old, an MRT means absolutely nothing.
I'm going to work backwards and try and remember all three. Messaging and everything, we're very fortunate. They're a very professional comms team and worked very closely with us from the very beginning, and will challenge planners and go, no, you can't put that out. Let's do this. Let's work together, so that it's still kind of provocative enough, if you like. Like, one of the pieces of copy that's going out is the government says we need to build new houses, so where are we going to put them? And that's deliberately there to poke a reaction. Like, it's been thought through, and although probably when the councillors spot it, they might be a little bit like, why did you do that? But it's like, well, we need people to tell us, like, this isn't. And by provoking that reaction, it gives us an opportunity to respond and to say, well, no, these are the facts here. We're not doing this just to be annoying, or because, you know, it's opposite to our personal agenda, or this, that, and the other politically. But yeah, we're very well supported as a group, and I think because we kind of have the Publica formation, so Publica supply services to the 3 or 4 councils, including West Oxfordshire and Cotswolds, you get that broader support. So we have a social media specialist that supports all of the councils, and we have a head of comms and marketing who does the big campaigns and works very closely with each of the planning policy teams, who does understand enough about the process as well to appreciate some of the difficulty. So that's that one. It's the middle one, social media cost. We've just always found that bang for buck, so if we spend 200 quid on social media ads, the response and the tracking rate back is worth the money. Because I think, I don't want to quote figures because I'll probably be really out, but you know, even just the click back rates are so high by using those ads, that is actually a really affordable way to do it. But again, that money has been put into the local plan budgets and reserves, so it's there for consultation. So we're not scratching around trying to find it. So even without the PropTech cash, it exists. And really, I guess the PropTech cash just allowed us to be freer, if you like, with the amount of media and graphics and design and stuff. But actually now we've got those established brands for each Cotswolds and West Oxfordshire. Every time we run a consultation, because we're using those brands, it's not a start from scratch process. So actually it's a lot less money every time. And I can't remember the first point, Chris, sorry.
The other point was just, do you know where the 18 to 25-year-olds are hanging out? Which social media sites they're using?
No idea.
Yeah, good.
Didn't even try, if I'm honest. We kind of went, we very much recognised that actually the place to start was more of the 55s to 25s, and that if we're going to get the next younger ones, really we need to start working with our communities teams, and really getting in at ground level in schools and going in and doing that sort of stuff. But the resources just are not there. So we basically went for the achievable. Hopefully it might not be, but at least we know where they're hanging out, and we've identified those groups and people. So maybe if we do find out where the others are hanging out, we'll let you know.
I think it's TikTok, but nobody can sell a plan on TikTok, can they?
No, and I am yet to find a comms team that will support a TikTok account either, because of the amount of work that's involved in kind of maintaining that, and who's going to do the content, and like you say, how do you market a local plan on TikTok? You know?
Well, if you could get somebody from Blur doing a nice dance, I think that's a pretty good start.
We'll get Alex James to share it. We'll be away, but I think that's quite unlikely for free.
Don't want to prolong it, but 2 points you just made there, I just have to pick up on and agree with totally. Is the first point about being emotive and short and sharp to hanging out those messages to 18-24-year-olds. There's nothing they like better than something that's emotive. And we use things like, nobody ever listens to you, we don't build any houses, all that kind of stuff. They loved that, and that really attracted it. And the second point is the point that you made about, you said you were working with your leader on some of this in terms of the messaging that comes back from that younger age group. And I think if you've got a leader and a political and a member, environment that is prepared to hear those different messaging from the 18 to 24-year-olds, that is absolutely invaluable in this day and age, because the messaging coming back from that cohort of people, as we found, is so different to the average parish council and the average member. They want to build houses. Why aren't you building more houses? Why aren't you doing more, infrastructure? Why aren't you building on these fields? And I think that messaging, and if you've got a political environment that is actually prepared to listen to that message, it makes things so much easier. So I think if you've got a leader that wants to hear an average 18-year-old say, build more bloody houses, you've won quite a lot of the wars already there, haven't you?
Think so. Whether or not he'd support that opinion, I'm not sure, because I'm not sure they're the ones voting him in. But what is great is that he's prepared to front all these events, and he's very much like, no, this is what we should be doing. We should be opening the door. We should be showing people what we're doing. And he's a very balanced person, if you like. Like he's actually, God, at the risk of this, but a while ago there were some videos made with various members, and they were compared to hostage videos. Whereas our leader is much more eloquent, shall we say. Anyway, don't share that one out of here.
I love that, Joe. It's like the good ways and the bad ways of doing working with your comms team and being a bit innovative there. Don't make it look like a hostage video. And really great presentation. Thanks for that, Joe. It really echoes a lot of the findings throughout the PropTech Fund so far, and in utilising that, multifaceted team and trying new ways and trying to build those connections across local authorities, and having that focused approach to certain age groups. And as soon as we find those 18 to 25-year-olds, we'll share that in this group, although that doesn't sound that great when you say it out loud.
Or the 18 to 25-year-olds that give two hoots about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe, and continue to ask any other questions in the chat. Joe's around to answer any more as we're going along. But I think I'm handing over to Tony now. I've got your slides, and I don't mind if you want me to drive them or if you want to do it your way.
Josh is going to share them.
Yeah, I think.
There you go. I can
Josh
just sit back. I'm absolutely fine with that.
And I think Louise is going to start as well.
Oh, perfect.
Rather than
Louisa,
me.
Apologies. I'm handing over to Louisa.
Good stuff. I'll let colleagues introduce themselves as we kind of swap over in the presentation. But yeah, I'm Louisa from the London Borough of Hounslow. So I'm just here to introduce the project. So we've made quite good progress with our continuous funding project so far, and it's quite a collaborative project. So lots of input from lots of different people who can speak today as well. So just starting on the project deliverables. So we had 4 initial deliverables. The first one, the digitisation of the representation management process, and we wanted to kind of make this a lot more efficient and integrated. And this key deliverable will be the focus of our presentation today. But nonetheless, we had a lot of other deliverables as well. So one of the aims was to digitise the consultation statement to improve accessibility and transparency, which we'll touch on at the end of the presentation. The other deliverable was the graphic improvements to make existing consultation tool more intuitive and accessible, which we've integrated quite well, and hopefully we'll get another chance to show you that another time. And then finally, the kind of last deliverable was the integration with the development management database using an API. And for various reasons, that hasn't been possible at this time. And I think DLUC have kind of touched on that at other points. So we'll move on and tell you about this first deliverable. So the problem that we had was with our existing representation management process. Both Chesterfield and Hounslow had issues with this. It takes a long time and a lot of officer resource, and that's something that we kind of wanted to change and innovate. So we both had an existing multi-system approach to representation management, and it wasn't really fit for purpose. We both use sort of different but very rudimentary systems to process those representations. At Hounslow, we use the just Excel really, which was extremely slow and didn't present information in quite the right way. And Chesterfield used an Access database, which was slightly better than our spreadsheets, but again had its own problems, sort of like not being supported by ICT teams, etc. Yeah, so we needed a system to kind of bring this all together, which after kind of putting our bids in, we realised we kind of had the same issues and brought together this kind of collaborative sort of super team to solve this problem. Yeah, so this is just a quick graphic to show the process we took to representation management, and this will probably be familiar to lots of people on the call. So we get reps in lots of different formats. So emails, letters, PDFs, consultation portal. So we needed a system to, to kind of process all of those. And then we go about kind of summarizing those reps in the kind of different multi-systems, and then go about responding to them and then packaging them in the consultation statement. And that whole process takes around 65 minutes per rep to do the processing part, and then responding and packaging is kind of separate. But if you imagine we get around 700 representations per local plan consultation, that takes a huge amount of time and resource for the team. And I'll hand over to my colleague Rob to talk through our project scope.
Hi, so I'm Rob. I'm also from Hounslow. And yeah, following on from the problems identified by Louisa, I'm going to talk about what we wanted from the solution. So we sought a partnership with Urban Intelligence to develop an online cloud-based system that will allow us to store all this representation data in one central place that can be accessed by multiple officers, so we can work collaboratively on the same reps. It was, as Louisa said, really important that it could receive reps of different formats. So like she said, we get them submitted directly into the portal. We can also get PDF, Word, email, even written letters. So it's important that we can input all of that into the tool really easily. We also wanted something that means we can split up the reps into sub-reps easily. So this means, say you get a really long rep from a statutory consultee and it's got, I don't know, it covers 10 points and only one part of it's on heritage. By being able to sub-rep and then allocate these sub-reps to specific officers, it means that, I don't know, your heritage officer doesn't have to read 15 pages. They can just read the one paragraph that's relevant to them. It's also important that it is tied into the existing sort of spatial and sites database we have. So we can tag reps and sub-reps with site data, GIS layers, all that kind of mapping data. That's important. And also the idea is, and we're developing this at the minute, that we can pull all of this data through with all the tagging, with all the GIS information through from the initial submission of the rep through to the consultation statement entirely within the same tool. And again, here we've got, this is kind of the flow of how it works. So we receive reps in different formats. We can assign them to officers. We add the spatial data and we summarize them. And as you can see, this has really, really sped up the process. It's now 15 minutes on average instead of the 65 it was taking before. Again, this doesn't include responding or the packaging, because obviously the responses are very rep dependent. And now I'll pass over to Josh, who's going to give a demo of the tool.
Great, thank you very much, Rob. Yeah, so I'll just stop sharing for a second and then just get the other screen up. Okay. Yeah, so just to introduce myself quickly, so I'm Joshua Matthews. So I'm from Urban Intelligence. I'm our product manager for the Placemaker solution, which is kind of a package of lots of different tools, I suppose, for local plan evidence collection and management and creation. So I'll just share this screen. And so like's been mentioned, what we're doing with this specific product is linking into an existing product that we have, which is the site assessment module, which Hounslow and Chesterfield are both using. And just as a very quick overview, what the site assessment module is doing is basically it's a database and a product for identifying, assessing and managing sites through the development plan process. So what we were doing as part of this project was basically building on an add-on that's kind of become its own product and module that both kind of looks at representations in their own merit, but also links into those that site data that we're presenting as part of this. So if I just go into the representations, so what we were developing firstly is, as mentioned, this kind of super database where we can effectively have consultation responses and representations from a range of different sources and for all different kind of consultation events within one place. So as Louisa and Rob kind of said, what they would traditionally have is potentially a different Excel spreadsheet for each and every different consultation event that they would run. And then I think the difficulty with that was then looking at kind of consultation responses as a whole and seeing what's coming in just about the various different consultation events that they're running, and really trying to understand kind of what's being said in the main about the different kind of consultations and about the different things that are being presented by the council. So what this is in effect, and this is currently being built out, and well, it's being built out, but it's currently being filled in and used by Hounslow. So there's a couple of kind of empty fields here, but basically if I go through here, you can see all of the different, each one of these is a different representation that's come in as part of the consultation that Hounslow ran recently with us. So if I go down to a test rep that Hounslow have kindly prepared for me, and if I click into here, what you can see basically for each and every one of these reps is kind of a range of details. So you can see the associated areas, which Rob mentioned, which I'll show you in a second. You can see a timeline of how that rep's been processed. So you can see when it's been created, the statuses that have been changed, the attachments that have been added, and any activity that's happened on that rep when the council is kind of processing it. If I go down here, this is not a real person, but basically this also links into a contact management database that we've also created as part of this, which effectively is a store of the consultation database. So all of the people that you would want to consult on, everyone that's coming in and issuing these reps, basically they get formed into their own database. So any new representations that come in from different events, they can then be linked consistently to the same consultee or the same respondent or the same agent, so that there's that consistency in terms of not having a slightly different name or a slightly different way of writing that contact every time you do an event. There's also agents here, so we can link the agents to this rep as well, and then the attachments. And if I just go back up to the top, so what we've got kind of in this initial version, like Rob was saying, is we've got the full text here, which I can go into and have a look at. This example is, I think, either a letter or an email. And what we've got is kind of a long representation, and within that there's multiple different points that have different attitudes and have different kind of topics and different spatial representations. So what we didn't want to do is just have one giant rep and then just have the whether that's an objection or whether it's a supporting comment or whether it's neutral, because we understand that there's kind of lots of nuance in the between the lines of these separate reps as well. So what I can see is that this has been split up into different sub reps here. If I just go back to the main representation screen, what those are listed as are these sub reps here. So the main reps get an ID 876, and then the sub reps get 876.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc., etc. And what you can see is for each one of these, there's a separate sub rep, there's a summary, and there's a response. So if I go into this one, for example, what we've created is basically this flow that goes through all of the steps with hopefully a bit more efficiency that the councils would have been going through when they were looking at these reps kind of traditionally. So what I can see on this screen is I can see the original full rep, so in all of its detail within all of its context. I've got the sub rep text, so how that's been split into a point, and then I can see any tags that have been kind of associated with that. And they're kind of, I guess, dynamic. So as we're going through and new events being added and new kind of topics and new attitudes are being created and being discovered within these reps, you can kind of create and add these as the council as well. I can then basically continue through this flow, and then I can do things. So like mentioned, I can go and I can attach this to a site. I can associate it with a site that's within the site assessment module. And again, I can still see the context there, and then I can attach those. I can attach it to any layers that might be associated with the site. So as part of the site assessment, what we're doing is dealing with obviously like GIS layers quite a lot. And a lot of the time, the reps that are coming in have some kind of association with the GIS layer. It might be that they're talking about a specific conservation area. It might be a site allocation. It might be, a flood zone. It could be any of those. So what you've then got is the ability to go in and select those and associate that rep or that sub rep with that layer as well. Another kind of problem that and a step that was taking a long time within the processes that Tony and Louisa and the team were going through is redacting the text. So this one here is quite a small subrep, but if it was a longer one that might have information about addresses or names or contact details or things like that, that you wouldn't necessarily want to present when you go to put this rep into a consultation statement later down the line, is we've got the ability to kind of highlight the text and then redact that for the relevant reason. So I can redact it, say that it's a name, then the fact that that's a name gets highlighted whenever the council officers are looking at it. But when that rep is then put forward into the consultation statement, that's kind of just replaced with just information just to say that it's redacted. And then finally, what I can do is look at the summary. I can add a summary, and then I can also respond. So another issue that the councils were facing was that especially if these kind of events are separately managed and separately organised in different Excel spreadsheets or by different officers, they were finding that their responses, even though they were probably saying the same thing, there were slight differences in how they were presented, and the text and the language might be slightly different. So what we wanted to do, and what we've been doing, is adding kind of a response manager as well. So for each one of these sub-reps and the main representations as well, what the councils can do is create a response or look at a library of responses that have already been created. And then they can effectively then say, okay, so this sub-rep and the summary that I've put in here relates to flooding or conservation area X or development in the Greenbelt. But what I can do is then just go in and look at what my response should be as a council to development in the Greenbelt, assign that, and then that becomes the response. So you've got that consistency across it as well. And also, you won't have to then, for each and every one, just type it in a slightly different way, which contributes hopefully from that 65 to 15-minute time saving. So I just close this off, and then if I just click finish, then that effectively, yeah, kind of completes that. So I've got the sub-reps here, I've got the events, and I've got the sub-reps. And what we're looking to do is, well, as Tony will probably explain in a moment, is what we've got here is this really, what I think is quite a solid foundation to then build upon. So we were looking at kind of the basics that we needed for this system, and then we can build things on like potentially AI or potentially, you know, automatic summarization or whatever that might be. Once we've tested those scenarios and tested those kind of functionalities and I suppose the ethics and kind of everything that's around there, we can start kind of tagging these things on and kind of attaching them to the existing product. Yeah, so that's that. So I'll go back to the presentation for Tony.
Thanks, Josh.
He says, 1 second.
So
there you are.
There we go. Thank you. So these we've learned more than this, but we thought we'd share these because it might be of interest. There's definitely more learning. So the overall aim was to save time, because the less time spent on reps management, the more time can be spent on engagement, consultation, you know, writing plans seems a good idea. And the work we did with DLOOK and that user service design mapping and the measurements seem to suggest that the processing of reps was where we could make the biggest time saving and possibly money savings. That's a logic behind going for this, and it's helped give us a baseline as well. So we found that really useful. One thing that we probably should have thought of, because we've got average times there for consultations and, you know, per rep was, and what we're going to do is times per type of rep, if you like, different scenarios depending on how long the rep is and who it is, and that provides a good measurement too. The other point that, you know, we think is a key learning for us is that because it was two councils, it reduced the risk. We were hoping, CBC were hoping to do a Reg 18. We've not got there yet. And Hounslow did manage to do a consultation on a design code, so a character and sustainability SPD. So it shared the risk of actually getting that real life user test. Two heads a better one as well. We did share and get some feedback because this is back office stuff from other councils who use the UI system like Gateshead. So because we found that of course, for one council, a change might save them time, but for the other council, it actually makes it harder and more complicated. Case in hand being actually ingesting those different formats of consultation and getting them a standard text format. Better for Hounslow, possibly a little slower for CBC. You know, those sort of things are important if you want a tool that works well for everybody and has that flexibility. The agile and iterative working, well, we struggled at first trying to write a spec because we were too engrossed with trying to think about what the solutions were and put those in a spec. And it was better to set out the problems and a bit of a flexible framework to allow things to develop as we went, especially given if you're working with user feedback, you're going to have to change maybe your expectations and you know, what your, you know, how the problems are solved. The other point, we trusted UI and we spent some money on user interface and user experience design, which were new terms to me, and that saved time and money for the developers. So that was a good, and we think it's made it more user friendly as well. So that was useful. You know, one to think about, especially if you've got engagement tools that you're looking at. The other thing that we learned was, rather than looking for what they call a minimum viable product, we decided to take the approach of focusing on smaller parts and do it, you know, bite-sized chunks. And some of our riskiest assumptions that we were trying to test with the user testing to see if we succeeded. I mean, for instance, give you an example, an assumption is that manual processing will still be necessary to cater for multiple formats of reps for at least the next 5 years. So there's an assumption, and that's what we've worked to. The other one was that this is quite a time-consuming part of the process. So focusing on that, we can save a lot of time and money that can be spent doing other things. So that's how we use that. And the last part is, as a principle, we wanted this to link to other systems and databases that we've got, and for the system itself to be open in. For instance, the licensing that we've, you know, the agreement with UI is that they open up their system to be API ready to other systems, because if you buy a system that's not like that, the data's a bit locked in, and the more data is in one place, we think that's better for us and for the public as well. They can get their hands on that more easily, whether it's a consultation or publishing results. We think that's really useful. Right, that's me done. Next slide, please. Your turn, Josh.
Okay, yeah, cool. So I guess, like I mentioned, there are various elements that we're still building out as part of this. So I've said kind of future elements / in development here, but they're also kind of in testing. So like Tony mentioned, something that's been really key as we've gone through this project has been getting kind of that feedback, both from Chesterfield and Hounslow, but also from kind of other stakeholders. So where we've done some development on other areas. So for example, we've mentioned here the consultation statement, and you can see like a little video of it being presented on the left-hand side there. We've created that, but we're aware that there is going to be some iteration required based on kind of the feedback that we get from various people. And the idea behind that one, just I guess as Louisa outlined right at the beginning, is to have both that kind of internal facing processing element, which I demoed a moment ago, but also having a way that those outputs and the information that's being processed, hopefully in a more efficient way in the back end, can also then be presented back out to the public and those who have obviously submitted representations. So we've kind of linked in all of the information that's in that rep management system into the consultation statement builder that we've got here. And what we're also seeing is that even though we kind of built it as a with the case or with the use in mind being a consultation statement, what it actually is it's got wider application potentially on just wider documents within the local planning process. So as you can see there, we've kind of thought about and we've experimented in how we can use this kind of interactive and kind of integrated HTML document with different use cases, so local plans and different documents and SPDs and kind of evidence-based documents. And given that we've got that kind of, I suppose, ecosystem where we've got the site data, and then we've got the geospatial data, and then potentially the consultation data and all of that as well, what we're thinking is that we can potentially link all of those together to create hopefully a more kind of transparent and more open system just in general when it comes to engagement, and kind of when it comes to joined up thinking across all different kind of aspects of the plan creation. We've also got that notifications management section where we're talking about integration with notifications on the representation management system. So that's, I guess, what the extra element that we're doing at the moment. So we've got lots of kind of bits of functionality, I suppose, within the rep management system where we're kind of passing reps through a process. So they come in, they get acknowledged, they get responded to, and they become part of the response. But what we're just working on is how we then notify the people that have provided those representations in the first place, and also just back into the site so we can start notifying different users within the council about different things. So, for example, if there's a representation that's come in that's specifically mentioning flood risk or conservation, that we can then notify the flood risk or the conservation officer that there has been a rep that they need to have an input into. And the idea is that if they're already using Placemaker, they'll have access to that. And then lastly, the AI, so I touched on that slightly. So as it says here, we're quite keen that we've got like an initial version that's relying relatively heavily on the planner and using their judgment to do things like summaries and responses and categorization, albeit with the idea that it's much easier to go through this process and much more consistent. But we're not kind of closing the door on potentially using AI and things like that later on. We're just kind of open to see where obviously a lot of the projects in this fund are kind of going and how we can potentially take some learnings from that and feed it into our systems. Yeah, so that's kind of us, I think, Joe.
Thanks, everyone. That was such an interesting presentation, and yeah, great to see the collaboration both between Hounslow and Chesterfield, and also I like the joint presentation collaboration going on there as well. Amber, you have your hand up. Do you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. But firstly, I just agree it's a really good building block. I'm impressed with all the functionality, and yeah, I can see a lot of value in it. I was going to ask though, let's say you have a rep that's talking about a site that has multiple issues. So let's say it's contamination and heritage, and the person starts their first paragraph with, I don't support this site, blah, 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 then says it's got archaeological potential, and then finishes with, but I will support it if contamination can be addressed. So you've got one paragraph that would need to be top and bottom addressed by the planning officer, but the middle by the heritage or archaeology specialist. How would you work with something like that without splitting it so far that it causes more work for everyone? That was my first question. And then the second one is about reporting. So what can you gather from the software? Is there reporting built in that you can then have a look at? So when we're thinking about options, we don't just read through every single, hundreds of reps on one policy and then make the decision. We want to compare how many people have supported it, said certain issues, and a little bit more of an in-depth review before we select our options. And I guess the same goes for other stages and different processes. But I was just curious what sort of reporting analysis you can do within the software, or do you need to pull stuff out to then do it? I know that you're obviously only just starting with this, so it might be something to build upon, but yeah, I was just curious for now where things are.
I think go on,
go ahead,
Louisa.
Josh, sorry. Oh, I was going to take on the first question and hand over to you for the
Yes.
second one, I think. But yeah,
Perfect.
The first one, I think that's where it's quite important to have like the officer input as opposed to everything being AI, because like you mentioned, it might be one rep that's like kind of 4 different themes, and an AI might tag that as 3 different sub reps, but an officer would recognize, okay, that is one representation that needs to be considered together. So I think that's one benefit of it being like kind of officer led as opposed to AI led. And then in terms of like tagging in the relevant officers, there's a function on there where you can tag in your conservation officer and tag in your your transport officer, and just kind of have that kind of collaborative input, and you can edit the response between you, etc. So yeah, it can be quite a collaborative task.
And we can, I think I get this you know, what you're saying, Amber. I think we can tag the whole rep as well, and not just the sub reps. So if it's the whole rep is you want somebody to look at the whole rep in its totality, you can tag the whole rep, even though your sub reps have their own individual tags as well.
Yeah, no, that's it. It's just the example shown, everything was nicely packaged sorry, into one paragraph is a subrep, then the next one is another, and another. And I was just thinking, okay, but what if your paragraph actually needs multiple people to respond because it raises multiple issues, and then not in a line by line basis? It'll be like, say, top and bottom with something in the middle that is completely different, because people do sometimes write like that. But yes, we thought about that, so they might talk about it at the top and then come back to it at the bottom again. Exactly. And if you're wanting to highlight the text, you're having to highlight two different bits, aren't you? And you've got overlapping highlighting as well. Josh, can you remember how we tackled that?
Yeah, well, so
is that still outstanding? You know,
well, it's potentially one of the things. So I think what I guess internally what we decided was that what we would do is kind of build on what we've got currently. So you've got that. Obviously, the kind of cases that we're working with are the simple ones that we've created just as an ideal case, and then we'll build complexity from there. I think is basically the kind of angle that we're going with. So I think later on, when we go to review the results of what Louisa and the team have been doing, because they're doing at the moment, going through all the responses that they've had from the consultation, and it might be that what we're doing, and I think I touched on it, is very heavily focusing on like the testing element of it, I suppose. So it might be that that is something that comes up loads of times, and in which case we'll probably have a think and figure out how we can potentially, you know, split the highlighting to create the sub reps. It might be that we include something in there where you can just assign just a passage of text to an officer, for example. But I think these are all kind of things, and these are all potential potential problems and potential use cases that are going to come out when Louisa and the team are going through it.
It's contiguous text at the moment, but you can tag the whole thing, which is
it goes back to that kind of
workaround.
It goes back to that kind of agile, I suppose, aspect in terms of how we've actually developed this, because we found that we were having like very long drawn out conversations about what ifs, and we were thinking of, you know, like 50 different scenarios for how a piece of text might be organized, and then we were like, oh, hang on, let's just, you know, like Tony said, look at the riskiest assumption, look at the baseline first, develop that, and then we'll kind of work on the rest of that afterwards.
Use it and then iteratively
change
it, hopefully, fingers crossed, get it used.
Totally. I mean, like exactly. I say, it looks great, and I love the sub God, I've forgotten what they're called already. Sub-reps, that's it. I love the idea of that, because wording might come out in an issue. Yeah. I mean, I think it'll work, because at the moment, you know, if we do it in Excel and you're asking 4 people, say, to respond to different issues raised in one rep, they're all going to have to add text to a cell. You can easily miss things because it looks like it's complete. Like, there's all sorts of issues, but I like the idea of sub-reps. I think that's a really good idea.
Good. Just on your other
question,
on the reporting side of things,
I realised that I completely forgot to show this. So basically, what we've got functionality to do in here is kind of group things by anything that's within the rep. So whether that be the topics that have been associated with the rep, whether it be who's been assigned to it, whether it be, you know, potentially a custom column later on. You can do things like grouping those reps together, so you can see just initially kind of what that looks like. Do things like filtering as well to really dive into the detail in terms of what's been said. But then I appreciate it was very small, but on the document creation, we've got kind of elements to build charts and kind of tables and do that analysis and that reporting. So we can effectively look at the database as a whole, and then click on, we want to create a chart, we want to see what this chart looks like, bring it in, and then what you're doing is importing data directly from the database. So, and then you can kind of choose what kind of aspects you're creating that chart on. So it might be, like, say, we want to look at, we want to filter it down to only the reps that have come in through the online portal that are looking at this theme that were made on this date about this area, for example. If that's a data field within our dashboard or within our database, and the idea is that it is because of the kind of the data that we've got, you can create a report on that, you can create a chart on it, and you can get to understand. So yeah, that kind of deep dive is built in.
That's great. Can you select things, so you showed before the standard responses that you can sort of build as you go along, so that you aren't retyping things every time or copy and pasting.
Yeah.
Can you sort of add into that how many times you've used that response, for example, and
so
those types of things as well, so it's not just what they've said, it's what you've said in response. You can have a look at how many times that's been repeated.
Yeah, so because of that kind of the database management, the relationship that's within there, so all the reps are linked to the responses, and then if I wanted to filter it on that, I could say only show me the reps that have this response that are associated with them, and then yeah, I can do that.
That's amazing. Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, I know that I took a lot of time there.
No problem.
No, it's absolutely fine. Great to have all the questions. Rudy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi. I've got I'm anyone who hasn't met me, I'm part of the Deluxe digital local plan team. And I've got a question, slightly different question. It's not really so much about functionality. It's sort of about positioning, I guess, and things. So you had all those great stats at the beginning about sort of amount of time saved per rep and all that kind of thing. Look, first of all, I should say it looks really, really nice, solid piece of work. I want to say that first. Then I was kind of wondering whether you've had a chance to kind of think about this yet, or is it too early to think about it through from a sort of cost benefits lens? Because we hear a lot, obviously, from local authorities kind of anxious about being able to afford kind of off-the-shelf software and things like that. But have you thought about kind of framing it in terms of, it kind of, the tool costs this much, but actually, just do this task alone can save you this much in kind of time and effort? Or maybe that's part of Urban Intelligence's kind of sales pack, probably, isn't it? Has any of that thinking kind of happened yet?
Yes. Yes, it has. Yeah, definitely. We because we did that service mapping at the start and measured our existing processes, we got the time taken, and we've got a rough cost per hour, if you like, of officer time. It's quite rudimentary, not as fancy pants as the way the service design, government service design manual asks people to do, because we just weren't capable of that. So we've got a rudimentary baseline against which we're going to measure the new version. So hopefully that'll give us a saving in time and then cost. But we've yet to find out the results, because we can do it per rep now, and Louisa can do it for her consultation. But we've used Reg 18 as the baseline, and there's a lot of variables, when you measure a process, and we're thinking actually we might have to chip it down to individual reps again just to get that evidence, because we're not necessarily doing for like every time with a Reg 18, because it can be so different. So yes, so if you've got any ideas as well, any help on that would be much appreciated.
That's a great story to be able to tell, isn't it, for local authorities who are kind of grappling.
It's essential, because CBC, probably like a lot of authorities, don't have any spare cash. So to take on new software, you have to hopefully ditch a load of other stuff and make a saving and show a saving, or just show a big saving, full stop, and then you might be able to go and buy something new. Absolutely. Without that, I can't see things happening unless people try and use their own ICT teams to knit things together, which probably won't necessarily work as well.
Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Well, thanks all. Really interesting. And if you have any more questions for any of the team, then do pop it in the chat, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions as the next and final point on the agenda. We're going back to Amber and Helen, I think, for the final agenda item. I've got your presentation yet again. I can offer to share if that's the easiest thing to do, but also happy if you're going to tag team between the two of you.
I'm gonna hand over to Helen today, because she's taken the lead on this this aspect, and it's helping me out whilst I've been focusing on some other things. So up to her, whatever works best. But I'm happy to answer questions as well.
I'll go from here, Jessica, if that's all right. Then I'll press the button at the right time.
Absolutely fine. And we can see that, so that's great.
Good. So this has been interesting to think back to when we started this, because it was last September and I was like, gosh, this is a year ago that we were putting in our bid for the continuous fund, and had to think about one of the challenges was how we better collect our reps from statutory consultees. And at the time, our perception was one of the barriers is around the fact that a group of people need to do that rep collectively as opposed to just one person. And we knew as we were about to start our Reg 18 that the system that we'd got and tested in an earlier round of the fund was bang the table, and we knew that was geared up for individuals. So that was kind of where the idea started. So as I say, we entered into our Reg 18 consultation knowing that that was potentially an issue. Using bang the table, setting everything up policy by policy, and hoping that would ease people's navigation of it. Come the January of this year, we analysed our results and those that weren't in bang the table, and their kind of thinking has evolved since then. And we were fortunate enough that with support from DLUC, we had an initial meeting with the Environment Agency and Historic England to sort of try and unpick what the issue was, because it clearly wasn't just what we perceived it to be. Again, by February, we'd had this idea of Conveyor, which is product mentioned to us. And as you can see from the timeline there, we kind of agreed to do a product trial. We looked at some content and put a proposal to the stat consultees, which by this point we'd got Natural England also involved. And I then contacted a couple from who'd responded to our Reg 18 to kind of represent some different areas of the sort of stat consultee group, so the Home Builders Federation, and then our own kind of voluntary service. We did some user testing in July. I say we did. Thankfully, DLUC took the lead on this with their colleagues, which was great because it meant it was completely independent from us. And the whole idea of that was that there would be a much more honest conversation. Analysis took place over August, and we got some feedback just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to take you through a bit more detail of some of those steps. So as I said, we were sort of trying to understand the challenge because as we found that people didn't use our digital platform at Reg 18. We had about 1,600 people and organisations respond to us at that stage. And whilst only about 60 of those came via email, they were an email with a PDF. We've all been there, and they are always the most lengthy and complex responses. So yeah, numbers wise, they seem small, but workload wise, they're massive. And what we learned from those early conversations with those couple of stat consultees was it wasn't just about collaboration. It wasn't just needing an extra login or an organisational login, which was kind of where our thinking was started, but just the whole kind of process that they use internally in those organisations, you know, and their need to have an audit trail of the comments that they've made, sharing it with colleagues. And obviously then when we started talking about introducing a tool for them to use, there was concerns then from those consultees that, well, if you do one and then every other LPA picks a different tool, we've got to learn how to use all of these things. So obviously concern there and the fear of increased workload. The other thing going alongside all of this is some of those organisations have their own digital transformation programmes going on at the moment. So there's just lots to think about. So our idea of an organisational login, which I think was the bones of what we put into our continuous fund bid, were a bit narrow in terms of our thinking. So we did a lot of learning with those initial conversations. Conveyor was something that was actually suggested to us by our suppliers Bang the Table when we were talking to them about the issue, because it was something that they said had interoperability with that system. So the idea of this platform is that it basically presents a kind of PDF style document, and in its most simple terms, you click and comment. So this is a screenshot from the trial that was done. You can see in the background here the text there with the paragraph numbers, and next to each of those is a little speech bubble. And the idea is that you click on that, one of these comment box pops up and you type your comment in relation to that. What then we can do with those comments is that they can then be dropped into Bang the Table, and obviously then they'll be analysed by the policy number and the paragraph number, so they can be aligned with any other comments that have come directly onto our platform. So to us, we thought this is great because on the surface it looks really simple. We'll be able to process the data really easily. So we were keen to give it a go. We had a demo with the stat consultees, but quickly realised that, well, as we all do, seeing a demo on a screen is one thing. You need to get in and have a play to really kind of get a feel for it. So that's what we decided to do with the trial. So in terms of feedback, we've again, DLUC have had about, I think about an hour and a half was set up of user testing sessions with those 5 different organisations. So you can imagine they had many hours of transcripts to trawl through, and provided us with a summary of the feedback just a couple of weeks ago. So we're still sort of going through the detail of that ourselves. So I'm just going to share some of the headlines from what was presented to us. And there were these 6 sort of key themes that they were kind of grouped into. So the first one around technical maturity and digital competence. I think we've had to unpick this because our initial thought was that technical maturity was around the product, but actually when you read the comments, it is more about digital competence and understanding systems from the user perspective, not the product itself. The second point there around accessibility needs, I think we found quite surprising because of the organisations that took part. There was actually quite a high number that had varying accessibility issues, whether it be colour blindness or things that just meant that on a map, perhaps the colour keys were really hard to read with greens and browns and things like that. Something that I should know, my husband has that colour blindness, but it never occurred to me to look on the map a key to see that would cause an issue. So again, it's being much more aware, and it's really focused our awareness on that to sort of think a little bit about those details and test them with a range of people. Obviously, functionality covered a wide range of things, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Lots of comments were around the user journey. So fortunately, the DLUC team did some user journey mapping with the organisations before the user testing. So they'd already given us a bit of feedback around the processes that they go through. So that's kind of helped how we shaped the trial. But I think, it's still a challenge that you've got an established way of doing things, and introducing a new way of doing things means the knock-on impacts across the organisation and all the colleagues that are involved in making that rep then just sort of multiply. Collaborating with others, again, we knew that this was a really big thing for statutory consultees, that they've got a wide range of technical experts within their organisation. They all need to contribute, and they all want to share and see and comment and do that. So for the sort of, it kind of crosses over with the functionality side of things. And then the final kind of broad area was about the attitude to the prototype. So how people generally felt about doing something new. I've kind of split these into 2 broad groups that I see, function being one, and then the kind of culture and perception being the other side of it. So in our kind of initial analysis, the functionality, there's more that we can do around collaboration. In terms of documenting responses, there is already options that we know that people will be able to click and download a copy of their responses to keep, but we didn't include that in the trial. So it kind of, we kept the trial really basic, but I think that threw up some functionality issues that actually we think can be quite quickly solved. In terms of allowing others to view the comments, again, this is a functionality thing in terms of, as I said, we did a simple test to start with, but the product does have the option to say, let you make a comment in draft, give you a fixed time to look at it, and then you can share it publicly, so then other organisations can see your comment and maybe comment on it, so then you get more of a conversational approach to the rep. So an interesting tool, but we didn't test it within this trial. We think that this could work really well in the future. But yeah, last one there on accessibility issues, as I say, I think that these are all things that can be addressed. I guess you're looking at those, we think that there are quite a few quick wins in there, and the analysis that we've received back suggested several of them, and that's where we're going to go back to Conveyor and see what we can do. In terms of the culture and perception side of things, obviously there's that technical maturity and digital competence, and I think when you first look at something new and you're expected to spend an hour and a half just filling in your comments, and we basically asked our consultees to respond to a handful of policies as they would have done at Reg 18. So, but it's quite a lot to take on board when you're doing it live and someone's watching you and recording you and listening to all your comments. So I can imagine it was quite daunting. Obviously, the changes to the user journey, that's a difficult one, because unless sometimes we're forced to do things differently, we hang on to the comfortable and known ways that we've got, and that's, you know, that's just how we are, isn't it? And then obviously that will impact on our attitude to any prototype or any new way of doing things, and it's kind of this carrot stick situation. So in terms of our next steps, obviously there's those functionality issues that we can address, and as I've kind of touched on, they were related to going through a much more detailed process, which we didn't cover in this simple trial. But as I said, we've got some of those quick wins identified, so we will be catching up with Conveyor in the next couple of weeks to start feeding back in detail and discussing how we can kind of get some of those quick wins in place. And I guess the challenge there for me is, if that functionality is improved, does that actually then reduce those kind of cultural and perception issues? Because if it ticks more boxes, then there's less anxiety, you know, it becomes easier, less resistance and everything else in theory. So that's what we're hoping for. And then I suppose after that, we do need to then say, well, what are the remaining barriers still? So there's more work to do there. We've also got external factors going on. So these digital transformation processes that are happening in organisations, it's how we kind of work with those and identify some common goals as we go forward. And obviously, since we started the trial, the planning reforms consultations come out, and there's definitely that support for the need to avoid that PDF document style. So that's a big step forward as far as we're concerned, and one of those, you know, what we were dealing with in January when our Reg 18 results came in. The final bit of the slide here is about some feedback again that we received from DLUC, where they've identified these what they've called risks of resistance. So again, it's not mandated, so there's less pressure to comply. And I guess actually what might be mandated in the reforms will get us a step there, but it won't get us all the way here. So I think it's just about encouraging that change as we go forward. Obviously, this system's unique to us, and there's still a kind of concern about different systems. I guess when we look at that, we've tried to look at processes for not just for us. So, and we feel that if you know, actually what you're required to do is register and get a log on and a password. So like any other internet-based system that you would use, and ideally to click and comment rather. And I think what we're probably lacking was maybe a few more instructional points on the page as you go through to kind of support. But it's not about learning a whole new system. It's more about navigation, I think, and it's just overcoming those barriers. Obviously, organisations still have their own processes in place. So again, it's this resistance to change those, especially when we're all under such time constraints. So again, the technical maturity, digital competency, I think in some ways it's about how we all move towards the fact that this is normal. It's not exceptional. But I guess those of us that are on this trial, we are not representing all local planning authorities, so we have to sort of have an awareness that we might be a bit ahead of the curve, and so it does look maybe a bit scary to some, but there's definitely lots of opportunities for us to go back. We think fundamentally the product is pretty good. We're not suggesting that it would replace any of the others, but it would be a channel that would suit certain consultees where they want to look at the whole document and they want to type things alongside that document. And we feel that that is generally where most of our staff consultees sit. So I think that's me. Yes.
That's great. Thanks, Helen. I think it's been amazing looking at the work that you've done from like you and Amber at Southampton, and also all the staff consultees that have worked with you, being so open and transparent and like positive in this space. And I think it's a great role modeling. And we've taken a lot of learnings from a lot of those sessions that you've just been talking about, and how they can be applied across various areas. So it's been a great project to be part of and watch a little bit from the sidelines. So I really appreciate you giving this update, because it's great to know. So we want to be making sure that our solutions are useful for everyone, and that we're making positive impacts across the whole of a user journey. Does anyone have any questions? Tony, straight in there.
That wasn't a mistake. No, yeah, well done, Helen. That looks like quite a good learning process. Quite tricky by the sounds of things as well. Just one thing struck me, because you talk about was it digital maturity? Was it? I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, the term seems to be used, technical maturity, digital competence, but I think they mean the same thing when we read into it.
Is that how user friendly it is, basically? Have I got that right? No, totally different thing.
When we sort of dug a bit into the comments, it's actually more about the confidence of the user in like their sort of competency and maturity in terms of using a new digital tool.
Yeah. So it basically, does it stop them even thinking about using it, or do they actually get onto the thing in the first place? Because in my head, because we spent money on interface and experience designers, because we thought that'd help with that side of things. Would that help, or is it a totally different problem?
It's something that we need to unpick a bit more. So we got this feedback only a couple of weeks ago, and while we've got a few quotes from the massive transcripts, there are certain things that we'll want to go back and ask for a lot more detail in. I think definitely what I feel we could do in terms of functionality is kind of have some pop-up instruction type things on the page. We stripped it back to keep it as simple as possible and not overwhelm, but at worst we've maybe not given quite enough information for the trial, or left lots of open questions, probably more than not given enough, because they're like, oh, can it do this, and would it do this, and we're like, oh yeah, actually it can. Yeah. But we didn't for this stage of it, and I think we can quickly deal with quite a lot of those functionality issues, which made people think, oh god, it doesn't work, or I don't really like this. So
clunky sort of, because I was intrigued, because user experience and user interface people are supposed to be the ones to help solve those sort of problems, because we found ourselves going, well, I think if it did this, it'd be really good and it'd work. But then the user designers would be able to go, hang on, what about this? And it'd be like, oh yeah, we're daft, aren't we? That works much better. So that might be worth bearing in mind to make sure whoever you're using have actually got those specific skills in their team.
Thanks, Tony. That's a good tip.
Sorry. Okay, cool.
No.
I'm just going to add as well that we've got a lot of follow-up to do, I think, on a lot of issues, but we were sort of playing devil's advocate a little bit and saying, okay, but it was raised that digital competency is a problem, but everyone that was taking part should have a level of digital competency do their role, because they're all in professional roles that need to use IT, need to look at maps, need to do all this stuff. So what is the problem? And I think it's, like Helen said, we can go through the detail of the trial, but we might just need to have some follow-up session. I mean, we want to anyway, with the stat consultees, not just those that took part, but others as well, to unpick that a little bit more, because that's a massive sort of stumbling block if we can't get over that. And then next comes the culture change as well, which I think goes hand in hand with that issue in certain aspects. So yeah, difficult, but you know, we're all working together to try and help us help them, and vice versa. So hopefully we can get there, but yeah, it just takes some time.
And those lessons are useful across lots of different user groups and stakeholders. So not specific just to one certain user group. So it is great to be talking about it in the open in this kind of space. Joe, have you got a quick question? Oh, you're on mute.
It was more sort of a slight agreement with you, really, and how we try and remove that fear of the unknown. Because I find even internally, you go, oh, this is a really easy product to use. Off you go, and they'll go, no, it's not. It's horrible. And it's like, well, you use Hotmail. It's, you know, like it's okay. You can't break it. And there's this sort of fear of failure with it, and I can't quite get under the skin of it. And then the other thing for me as well is, for all these stat consultees, and even when you go into the more kind of private development industry for those famous, massive, horrible PDFs, is it's about a way of, can the regs be changed to stop that happening, or to force a standardized form to be filled in so we can then use tech to manually upload.
I'm really curious,
because it's such a burden of admin for whoever it is. And with stat consultees, you kind of think, well, okay, who does it sit with? Is it us, or is it the Environment Agency? But then when you look at the private development industry, who for us are the worst culprit, it's like, well, why are they bunging the cost of admin to the council, delaying a process that they're always banging on that we take too long to do?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
I'm really curious, because we provided the responses to our Reg 18 back to the stat consultees who are taking part, trying to make things as simple as possible and saying, look, you don't need to retype a response here, you can just use what you've already sent us. And I do wonder whether any had issues in unpicking their response and could perhaps see things from our side a little bit, because that's a process we're having to do, like you just say, is unpick everything they put in a PDF. It might be that they didn't, but you know, I'm curious to understand that a little bit more. But there's also some resistance to just doing processes in a slightly different way, and I wonder whether that does come from a lot of these stat consultees being very early in their digital transformation. So we've still got a lot that are typing everything in Word and then copy and pasting into our software, which is built for you to be able to build it. So there's no need for Word at all, but it might just be because they're not quite at the same stage with their transformation. It might be that they do support that shift later on. So like Helen said, we're probably all a little bit ahead of the curve. And is that causing us problems for the uptake? That's, another question. But I feel like we've got more questions than answers at this stage. But, you know, it's a step forward, isn't it? Because we've tried something and we've got some feedback. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
brilliant.
Really good.
Well, sorry, just to bring the discussion to a close, because it's 2 minutes past 4, but it's been a really great show and tell session today. Thank you for everyone who has presented and joined in the discussion. It's been absolutely wonderful to see all the work that's been going on and to see the discussion that's been going in the room today. As you said, if you have any queries about any of the projects or any of the things that we've been mentioning here at DCE, then do reach out, and we'll look forward to seeing you again in a couple of months. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your rainy afternoon.
Bye all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
all.
everyone.
Thanks everyone.